Welcome everybody again to another VITA Learning webinar. Today we have Mr. Mark Wagenfield all the way up in Canada, giving us a shout out for dentures as technicians, denturists, making life livable and making us all learn more, which we can always do for sure. Hi, Mark.
Good morning. Hello.
So today we're going to talk about the principles of denture fabrication and freedom of movement architecture and whatever else Mark decides he wants to throw in there. Mark is always entertaining, so this will be an excellent webinar as always. So before we get going though, just to cover a few items, everyone's phone is on mute. So if you have a question, which we'll have questions at the end of the program, or if it's something that I need to interrupt Mark in, you need to use that question box that's located in that drop-down menu from the GoToWebinar. So under the questions, type in your question, send it off, and then we'll archive those and have those ready for the meeting at the end. So use that. The question and answer will be at the end. We're also going to record this, so if everyone doesn't want to be recorded, including Mark, now's the time to get off before we go too far. So
that's good.
But we are going to record it. It will be posted. Give us a couple days, but it will be posted on our VITA Learning website, VITA North America website. And you can go back and revisit and stop and listen and so forth like that. So we've got several hundred webinars listed on this site, along with other videos, short videos on how to use our products and so forth. So if you have a moment, get on the web, VITA North America YouTube channel, or on our VITA North America website, and visit those and watch those recordings and so forth. So today, principles of denture fabrication and freedom of movement architecture. I am going to let Mark add it after I introduce him. So Mark is a VITA Global Certified Trainer and Management Consultant. He's a licensed denturist, so he has a unique perspective, which I think is always good for these webinars. In the U.S., we're mainly technicians with some exceptions where we do have some denturists, but mainly as technicians. So Mark kind of gives you a different view into what's going on clinically speaking as well, which is good information. He's got over 35 years of experience, owns and operates his own clinic, Heritage Denture Center in Edmonton, Canada. Mark has spent his career on focusing on how dentures integrate in the mouth and the body. He inspires a unique awareness of occlusion and professional growth of technicians, dentists, and other denturists. So I will let you take it away, Mark.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. Good morning, everybody. Hi. Woo. So hi from a very cold Edmonton, Canada. It is minus 29 degrees Celsius. That means it's minus 29 degrees below freezing. So it's cold. So good morning. Welcome to winter. Thanks, Jim. Show my screen. There we go. Awesome. Good morning. Hi. First off, thanks to Jim. Thanks to VITA North America for supporting us and our professions and continuing education. It's awesome. And we really appreciate the dedication and involvement and support for our continued growth. We're here to be a hero to the patient. So that's fantastic. We're going to go through and being that superhero to a patient. And we're going to discuss today about denture fabrication and freedom of movement architecture. This is a cool name. I'm going to tip my hat to Jim for being involved in the title process of this. Freedom of movement architecture. And that's a really cool description of what we're going to talk about today, about the architecture of the mouth and specifically dentures. And that's what we want to hone in on today. And this is a little bit about my life journey And this is cool because I get to have your attention for an hour and a bit. And we're going to talk about and with denture-minded people. So that's why this is so cool and exciting for me, because I get to chat with denture professionals. So welcome. Thank you for taking a moment out of your busy days, and best wishes to everyone. And thank you for taking a moment out of your busy days to spend and to hear me and my journey and my thoughts in efforts to, again, promote our professions and denture fabrication and caring for our patients. First off, we don't slap teeth together. Woot woot. We don't. What we do is very difficult. We have to build dentures inside living mouths and on living tissue that is compressible and mobile. And generally speaking, we deal mostly with senior citizens. And so it's been, yeah, it's been cool, and it's been an interesting journey. My journey and what I've experienced are common denture issues I always like to review on most of my webinars. Are denture teeth chip, break, and pop off. Patient comes and says that they can't chew well with their new denture, traditional implant or digital, and especially the new denture is more loose than the old one. So that's always an interesting one that we see clinically when patients say that their new teeth fit worse than the old one did. Multiple relines with no success, and the plate is still loose, and they're using denture adhesive. Of course, fractures of the denture base. Food collects under the denture, but you typically don't need to reline it because it's been relined. And locators wear out after a few months, especially in regards to an implant case. Generally speaking, the rule of thumb is those locators should last anywhere from 12 to 24 months. And we're seeing them wear out after 3. And the issue lies with who's going to start to pay for that and pay for that changing. I mean, it's chair time for us. It's also material costs for us. So if you're going to start charging a patient money on that, and especially didn't make that clear at the beginning of the treatment plan, that can be an interesting conversation to have with someone regarding that cost. Soreness, of course, and adjustments that we see with a denture, and then a temporary implant denture is preferred over the permanent one, which is also an interesting road to go down and have discussions with patients when they tell us that. So these are the complaints that we see clinically when we deal with denture patients. And those complaints add up. I mean, again, it's stressful for us. It's interesting. I mean, one would argue life is stressful, and we have stresses, personal and professional based. And the one thing that I've started to, again, pay more attention to are the stresses, especially at work, and some of the stresses that I can take better control of. These types of stresses over time are repetitive for us in the office when we deal with these types of complaints or issues that come from patients. And it certainly can lead to burnout for us when we deal with it day in and day out. On a repetitive nature, it wears us down, whether you're a technician or a denturist or the doctor. That doesn't matter. We get those repetitive complaints. The World Health Organization listed burnout in 2019 as a classification of a disease. It's classified as feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, mental distance from your job, feelings of negativism or cynicism. I always like to hone in on the cynicism because we do get cynical. We always talk about the unrealistic expectations of patients or such, and we always just try to make these jokes about it. We hear it at conventions when we walk around and talk with people, but that type of cynicism is there for us and in our profession, and that's how we're trying to deal with these repetitive stress issues. And it's time that we talk about it more and realize and get it out in the open. I mean, work is stressful, life is stressful, and so how do we get a better control out of that? The other consideration is reduced professional efficiency and a disrupted sleep pattern. The biggest thing is a major sign of burnout is if you go on a holiday, even if it's a long weekend, and you come back and then after a day or so at work, you feel like you've never had that holiday. Well, I think now, my dear colleagues, it's time to say that we got to take a hard look at this. So what can we do from it? I've experienced it, and my staff. Remember, especially as a dental office, your staff are the front end that deal with the patient directly. So the patient phones in, I have a sore, my mouth is sore, when can I come in? And the receptionist looks at the schedule and says, well, I can see you in 4 days or, next week. And, patients aren't feeling well. They have a sore mouth and they get cranky. So of course, this is an eye opener where the front end staff, they get an earful sometimes from the patients. And again, you deal with that day in and day out, month in and month out. It's hard on your staff. And then of course, it's hard on the practitioner who has to deal with that repetitive denture sore issue that they've seen it. So this is something that I've seen now and have discussed with professionals as I travel the world. And again, it was poignant for me a few months ago when I had this discussion at a conference in the US where the fellas, a doctor said, actually, you know what, Mark, you hit it. One of my receptionists just quit because she said she got burned out. And I asked her, what burned you out? Like, what part of the job? And she says, the people complaining all the time. And so we got to be aware of that. Your front end staff, whether you're a lab, they're dealing with the doctors, whether you're at the dental office dealing with the patient, your front end staff are dealing with the person on the end of the phone that isn't happy. And it can wear on them. So that's why I wanted to start discussing this. And that's why I wanted to wish to share my journey. So hi, I'm Mark, for those of you that haven't met me yet. I'm 53 years old. I just had a birthday. I started caring for patients when I was 17. So it's been, 36 years of my life now, building dentures and partial dentures and implants and digital. I love what I do. It's the right path for me. And I've learned a few things along my journey. And so I want to share that journey with you and efforts to help you become more aware of the architecture of the mouth of a denture patient and trying to reduce the stress where you can. How we're going to reduce the stress here in the office and clinically is by getting a hold of our adjustment rate and how many times that patient has to come back with those repetitive complaints that we see. So this has been my journey. So dentures are like a tort. It's made of many different pieces. So I want to go through a few things with you first on a PowerPoint and then do some visual stuff with the document camera after. So the slice number 1 is the central nervous system and its relation to a denture patient. So a central nervous system learns and functions on a pattern or a repetition. So when a patient comes in with a 10-year-old denture, there's a certain pattern that the brain has developed with that denture. And then we build a new one, and now that pattern is disruptive and disrupted. And now that it's a new pattern because we have a new vertical, there's new teeth, they're sharper, it's a new fit. So these things impact the pattern of what that patient's been experiencing. The big thing about patterns and repetition is it's change. So the one thing I always like to ask is, everyone that's listening, all 125 of you, through your life and your experiences, wherever you are here in North America-ish, do seniors handle change well? So most people in an in-person course all shake their head and go, no. Yet they come into our offices and what are we doing? We're changing their denture and we change it. Do they handle change well? And we kind of forget that soft piece of it. And I like to use that word now, soft end, because again, we're dealing with people. Patients are people and people are people, which means now we have to try and understand that with a senior, we're changing something and can they tolerate the changes that we think are okay for them and what we're taught to do, whether it's clinically or whether it's in the lab. So I understand that there's a pattern associated with this. That central nervous system now is subject to degradation due to age, health, and medical concerns. So your muscle tones and the neuromuscular and neural pathways aren't as sharp as they used to be as we get older. So remember, there's no nerve into the denture or the denture teeth. I love this picture, so thank you. We forget that when we ask a denture patient to close, they can feel their teeth touch together, like I can with my own teeth. We forget that. And then when those denture teeth touch, they can't feel them. When they interfere, they can't feel it. They only feel other things happening. And we often misdiagnose that because we forget that they can't feel their teeth touch. So the one thing to remember is to often remind yourself, like, you have to remember they can't feel their teeth touch together. and we forget that. So how does a denture patient feel? Well, number one, they're going to feel hydraulic pressure. So they feel the pressure of the denture pushing against the ridge. So when you feel and you touch your teeth together in Centric, there's a certain amount of pressure applied, and that patient feels that pressure. So then they know when they swallow, they feel their teeth touch. They don't feel their teeth touch, they feel the denture pushing on the ridge, and they equate that hydraulic pressure to this is swallowing. And then when they eat, they feel more pressure. So then the brain equates that, oh, this extra pressure, now I'm chewing. So you have to remember they're feeling through hydraulics. So they're feeling the hydraulic pressure created that's happening inside the ridge. Now, are they sensitive to hydraulic pressure? Are they sensitive to the pumping of the ridge? Well, that we can get into some more. That's been an interesting observation on my part. So I'm just going to touch on it now quickly. So a patient will feel different hydraulic pressures. You take a new impression, you're going to change the fit of the denture. You are changing how the denture presses on the ridge. You're changing the hydraulics already there. And then if you open the vertical, you're changing the hydraulics, because now you're opening the vertical, the masseter muscles, temporalis muscle are operating at a more peak efficiency or a stronger level. So they're going to also put more pressure down when you bite, and when you chew. So now you're changing the pressure. So these things already change the perception of what that patient is feeling. So I have some patients, and I've observed a few things along the way regarding patients that I'm going to share with you that kind of gives me a little bit of an idea of, do they handle change well? So that I'll review with you shortly. So now we have the different hydraulic pressure on the ridge. So patient feels with different hydraulics. And now you have to appreciate that they have a different feeling of a denture, and now influences how they feel the bite rim, the wax trium of a new denture or an implant denture. So you got to keep in mind, you make a wax rim, it's different than their denture. So we insert something into their mouth that isn't the same feel and compression than what they're used to. And then we ask them to give us a bite in like a minute type of thing. From the time that the rim is inserted in the mouth, and we tinker with it, and then we're asking them to give us some critical information when the central nervous system is trying to understand what it's feeling, because it hasn't felt that before. So you have to watch how you shape wax rims and go through that. So that's part of the architecture of understanding a denture, and understanding now how that the muscles and the brain has learned to understand what it's feeling inside the body and inside the mouth. So I craft wax rims much like a denture. The incisal edge isn't 5 millimeters thick, it's 1 millimeter thick, because that's what an incisal edge is. So I'm recrafting how I make a rim so that it doesn't act as so much change to the central nervous system when I introduce it into the mouth. Because remember, it's made from wax or such, and so everything I use in the office now is tailored to make it feel just like a denture. So I don't use like cure material anymore because it's too rough. It has to be smooth like a denture base on that wax rim. So I've just gotten accustomed to using wax. I've been tinkering around with printed materials. You want it hard and smooth like a denture base, so that it's the same type of feel against the mucosa of the mouth. So these things are all part of that central nervous system and how the patient feels. The other slice to understand with a patient is that we expect people to bullseye land centric each and every time. Why? Because we do that on an articulator. We line up the teeth, we open and close the articulator, and it's precise and holds centric. And then we expect that to happen in the mouth of a denture patient when the denture sits on soft mobile tissue and the patient's trying to chew something, and oh, they're a senior with a degraded neuromuscular system, possibly, and such. So now we're expecting someone to pinpoint land centric when they can't feel their teeth touch. Yet we set that up like that in the lab. Sorry, everyone, my dear colleagues, that was an aha moment for me when I realized, wait a minute, they can't feel their teeth touch, yet I'm trying to bullseye land centric here. And how are they going to reproduce that out in the real world? So we have to keep that in mind. So that led me down my journey and my trying to understand that, okay, that's not possible to do that. It's not possible for a patient to do that because they can't feel their teeth. And it's certainly not possible when we have other medical and health conditions and frailty of a patient come into that. So what are we going to do about that? Well, that's why you're listening to me babble on. So it's the hit and slide. So when the patient can't land in bullseye land centric, there's a slight hit and slide. So the teeth hit and slide themselves into position. And that's, again, been my aha moment where the hit and slide causes the problems. So it's not the degree of cusps that matter. It's the fact that you're trying to land centric and bullseye land it into position, regardless of the cusp height. So there needs to be a degree of freedom there within centric, so to allow them that ability to land in and not rock the denture base, which is causing all of our problems. So that's freedom in centric. That led me down then to the understanding and awareness of what freedom in centric is. So I'm trying to lay forth the learning curve for me over my professional time dealing with patients of what I've observed and then what I've been trying to do to correct it so that I can get a better hold of the adjustment rate and the common denture problems that we see, and thus try to reduce my stress as a practitioner. So a freedom in centric by definition is the flat area in the central fossa in which opposing cusps come into contact and permits a degree of freedom. So that means a cusp comes into a fossa. So the cusp is like a hammer. It's like a mortar and pestle. So it comes in, and the fossa is like a bowl, like a cup of your hand. And that bowl or that fossa doesn't lock the cusp in place. It has a little bit of freedom along the side walls, which are the guiding planes of the teeth. So the freedom in centric is the ability for you to slide in centric, and that's freedom, and you can wiggle. So that's the real life example of you touching your natural teeth together in centric. You can wiggle them around a little bit. So everyone, please try that. Try to touch your teeth together and you try to wiggle them in centric. Don't go eccentric. Don't go full out excursion. It's just touching in centric. It's about a 0.5 millimeter to 1 millimeter of space that you can touch together in centric and touch your teeth together. We all have that because, again, Mother Nature gave us that because we can't bullseye land centric with teeth that can feel, yet we make product that we expected that to happen. So that was my aha moment where you look at the screen here on the left. Let me just get my laser pointer. So here that permits a degree of freedom here that it can land, because if you lock it in, then it's going to hit and slide into position. So that's what the red arrows denote here for us, is that we have to be careful because denture teeth are made without freedom in centric. So that's taking me to our next, aha moment. Remember, a patient can't directly feel the hit and slide. They only feel the denture base wobble, or the thing's breaking, or it's uncomfortable, or it's rubbing on the gum. We typically misdiagnose that hit and slide because the patient can't tell it's happening. It's very difficult to see visually. And again, remember, we're here to protect the temporomandibular joint, especially on implant cases. And so remember, they can't feel their teeth touch. So this is what it looks like on an articulator. Let me find the play button here. So there we go. So you can see I can wiggle it in centric. And now I do excursions. So that's our standard working and balancing that we all know. And then there's that little wiggle that can happen. So cusp to fossa. So we can get denture teeth that have this ability. So I have an articulator that can do it. I use denture teeth that can do it. So again, we have to remember they can't feel their teeth touch. So the idea is that when the cusps come into the fossa, they're able to land in and not hit and slide in. So forgive me, I tried to do this with a camera and holding a denture. So this is a denture that has freedom in it. And so it's, and let me just, there we go. You can see how I can wiggle it side to side. I'll do it again on the document camera later. And now, yeah, we've got working and balancing, so we can do that. But it also has that ability to, when you hold it in Centric, it could do that little wiggle, just back and forth a little bit. That's important because then the cusps are coming in and touching in the fossa without the hit and slide. So you say to yourself, okay, but Mark, we have working and balancing occlusion. Oh, look, I put my camera on. So we have working and balancing occlusion. Yes, but you have to remember when you have working and balancing occlusion, the working and balancing has to touch together at the same time. Okay, so I apologize somewhere along the way. Oh, there we go. So you have to appreciate then that every cusp has to touch at the same time for working and balancing to work. That's not going to work in a mouth, and in a mouth of a senior citizen, I'm sorry. That's been my personal observation over my time. And the other one, and one of my biggest aha moments in my career, is that not every denture tooth or digital design has freedom in Centric. So what I just showed you exists, and then it's not existing though in every denture tooth that we buy and that we use. It's only a handful of teeth that incorporate this globally. Now, forgive me, I try to stay current. This is a really hard one to ask because you basically have to go to the R&D department of companies and talk to people that are educated on this. It's not often talked about in brochures and in documentation of teeth. You have to really go to the people that designed the tooth to understand it. It's not something we talk about at all from a marketing perspective of denture teeth. So it's very difficult to know which teeth have it and which don't. So I've gone on a journey to research this. So VITA has it. They only have it in their lingoform teeth, MFT posterior teeth, and Physiodens posterior teeth. All of the other tooth brands within the VITA line do not have freedom and Centric. So when you hold them together, there's a little bit of wiggle, but there are other lines, you hold them together, there's no wiggle. It goes right into working and balancing. Ivoclar Veneris 2, and those, and Mertz Dental Article posterior teeth. Those are the only ones that I know of. One would argue Candular, just from the lingual occlusion point of perspective. And that's it. It's a very small base of denture teeth and posterior teeth that have that. And I mean that also very respectfully and diplomatically. If I've missed one, then I always ask someone to please email me and let me know so I can update my inventory list. But that's what I've found and have found out through my journey. And I mean that respectfully. So it's only a handful of teeth that I know of that incorporate this design. That was a big hum for me. So what I was doing was I was setting up working and balancing teeth, thinking I was doing it right, but they were locked in Centric. And then of course they would hit and slide into position. But remember, in the architecture of the mouth, when the patient chews, all those teeth aren't lining up at the same time. So working and balancing becomes null and void because it's not hitting at the same time and balancing at the same time. So it doesn't matter that I set it up so in the lab. It's not functioning like that in real life. And that was my aha moment. I have really cut down on my adjustment rate because of the incorporation of freedom and Centric and varying degrees of it as I play with it to this day of the understanding of a patient. So that leads me now into the architecture of the chew cycle. So again, how does someone chew? So I like to always start off with this video. This is of natural dentition chewing, apple, carrot. So take a look. What do you see? So the patient's chewing an apple and the chew cycle is shaped like a teardrop. Okay, now they're going to flip and they're going to chew a carrot. So my question is, does that look anything like the articulator when you did working and balancing on an articulator? No, because I'll show it to you later. So you can actually even see the teeth, look at it coming in at an angle, right? So it's programmed, the mouth is programmed that the teeth come in at a certain degree. They come together and touch. So this is a mortar and pestle system. So the teeth are there to crush the food and mince the food. And it works within a chew cycle shaped like a teardrop. And you actually can see the patient touch together, and you can actually even see it touch and slide and open. So there's that degree of freedom in there. And the next video of the patient chewing, I want you to pay particular attention to the chew cycle. Look at it and what's different than the other ones. It's a different patient. You see how that's less, look, it's more vertical. Look at that chew cycle, it's more up and down. Isn't that fascinating? So now teeth have to operate within that chew cycle. So that a chew cycle influences tooth interaction and function, anterior and posterior. So what I realized is even though I set it up painstakingly on an articulator, I'm sticking that in someone's body that has possibly a complete different architecture and motion and cycle. And the teeth, although I set it up great on the articulator, isn't going to work in that person's mouth. So now this is about understanding that we have this freedom in Centric, so that you're letting them land in, and I call it like a helicopter pad, so that they don't have to bullseye land, so that the cusps are free. So you have to imagine every cusp has that freedom in it so that it can land. And then it depends on what they're chewing. And then that the cusps are not interfering with each other as the system functions in that specifics of that chew cycle for that person. So I had the awareness of, wow, there's a freedom in Centric, so our bite isn't locked together. And then I had the, wow, we chew with a cycle, and everyone's cycle's different. It's like your fingerprints are different. So now what that means from this point of view here is that the red dots is where the hit and slide occurs. And this is functioning now within a chew cycle, which is denoted by the green little arrows that you see. So this thing is functioning in a cycle. And now we don't want the cusps to touch and interfere, because remember, the patient can't feel that and tell us that it's happening. So chew cycles are denoted now. I've noticed that they're flat, oval, ovoid, and teardrop. So flat needs a lot of freedom in Centric because the patient's almost milling it. And you see these types of chew cycles on patients that have really old dentures where the occlusion is worn flat, because to eat, they actually have to have adjusted their chew cycle to chew, imagine more like a cow. And people that have a good fair bit of dentition left are chewing more like a teardrop because the teeth aren't flat. So that there's this more teardrop motion. So that's where this comes in, and the complaint of my new teeth are looser than my old ones, because on the old ones, the dentition was worn flat, so their cycle to chew had to be more flat and more horizontal, because they had to mill their food and chew like a cow, so to speak, to be able to chew. And then I went in with good intentions, gave them teeth with cusps, locked the bite in, but now they needed to chew like a teardrop to make that work, because that's how it worked on the articulator. And of course, now remember, there's a pattern. So the brain has a repetitive pattern ingrained in it, and it's trying to do what it's been doing for years. And now all of a sudden we've changed the pattern. And now, of course, what are happening? All the cusps are hitting and it's dislodging the denture. So hence the comment. So it was interesting because I can tell you, my dear colleagues, all 141 of you now, darn it, I mean, I would have a patient come in, this is like during the first 5 years of my career, and the teeth were all worn down. So I took new impressions and took the bite and set everything up, and the patient comes back and goes, it's loose, it's loose. I'd remount the thing, put it back on the articulator. Please, my Centric's right, working and balancing's all good. You take that little onion paper and you're checking all of those little cusps to make sure they're all touching, and everything that school taught me. Put it back in. Oh, Mr. Smith, everything looks good technically. Comes back, oh, it's still loose and it's jumping around. Well, that was what was going on. This phenomenon now that I'm reviewing with you is what the patient was experiencing. They just can't tell us that. And that was been my aha moments now of figuring this out. So I'd like to escape. No, wait a minute. Actually, you know what? Well, we won't. I'd like to thank my OCD now for this long journey of mine of trying to figure this out. So the chew cycle then influences how the teeth function. And so then depending on what I see and determine from the patient will be dependent on how much wiggle room I give them and how much clearance I give them in freedom and centric, and so that the cusps don't hit and slide into position. So what you're getting out of me now, and I'm going to say this so it's forever recorded, I pay less attention to working and balancing occlusion than how all of the cusps function within the chew cycle of a patient. That's more important to me now. And so how do I identify a chew cycle? Well, we can have the patient chew something for us so we can identify it. Green pepper, cucumber, or nonstick gum has worked for me clinically. I've also started to pay attention to how they speak, because when they speak, their jaw moves. Their jaw moves because it has to move to enunciate words. So these are the building blocks of our language. That kind of tells me, again, how things are going to go in the mouth. So let me show you. So this patient is now going to speak for us. Watch the move. You see the mandible move? You see how it swings out to the left? It's not swinging out to the right, swings to the left. So now when she eats, by golly, guess what's going to happen? Because it's already there fundamentally on the building blocks of language. When she chews, it's going to fundamentally go out there as well and favor her left side when she's chewing food. Because this patient was in because saying, well, my teeth are loose. Well, when are they loose? Well, when I speak a lot. And I was always taught that that was an extension issue, and check extensions, because if they're speaking a long time, the muscles are knocking it out. No. Now my response to that diplomatically and respectfully is no, the teeth are hitting, but they just can't tell it's hitting. Back in the day with porcelain teeth, yeah, they'd come in and go, yeah, they're clacking. Well, now with acrylic teeth, that you don't really hear the clack anymore. So now that's what was happening. The clacking means that they're hitting. They're hitting because it's not the same of how we set it up on the articulator in the lab, of how it's functioning here. So I'm using now the building blocks of language and phonetics to help me gauge what the chew cycle is. Now, this video was sent to me, so thank you, Campbell Dentistry. Look, this is a complete upper denture, 6 lower anterior teeth, and free end extension partial. And they gave the patient something to eat. And look at that thing, huh? So love the video because it's hard to, chew with your mouth yarded open. But look at them eat. Yeah, it's in a cycle. And you can hear the teeth clacking and the denture clacking because, again, it was set with working and balancing occlusion. And you have to now remember that it's now that you're looking for freedom of cusps and freedom and centric. So this case presented itself to me a few months ago, actually. You can look at the wear. This is an implant denture, so it's a complete upper denture, lower denture to locator implants. You can see how worn down the dentition is on the denture. I mean, let me get my laser pointer. Look at this. You see that? Look how worn this down this is. Look at this. She's worn millimeters off this thing. Millimeters. Okay. Now, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to open the vertical because I'm supposed to, and I'm saying that in my funny voice. And I'm going to give her teeth with tread wear on it again, and now expect she's not going to have a problem. Because watch her talk. Do you see that thing function out to her left? Do you think that's going to go away when I build her new teeth? No, because that's who she is. So when she eats, do you think she's going to function out that and function and chew on her left side more? Yep. So I've identified now that when I build this denture, I need to clear everything out for her to function over there. So I have the patient say the days of the week and the months of the year. Days of the week and months of the year cover all the phonetics or the building blocks of the language. So you've heard me say that. And now those are like the A-E-I-O-U's and the consonants. This is now the building blocks of the English language. But then I also get them to say it in their mother language if they have one. So if it's Cantonese, Polish, Ukrainian, German, whatever, I get them to do that because more than likely they're going to be speaking their mother language at home and not English. So they're going to favor me as an English here, but I want them to speak their mother language of what they speak more. And then I'm watching the building blocks of that mother language. Even if I don't necessarily understand Cantonese, I can watch the jaw move to be able to pronounce the building blocks of that language, and I'm watching the jaw posture. And then I'm able to say, okay, how am I going to set the teeth to function within that? So this is the architecture, and again, I love the title. This is the architecture of a denture of what I've learned. So now, this is the new denture I made her. So watch, she's going to speak again. But now you'll see that there's not flat teeth on this thing. Okay. Does anyone have a question? Because type it in the question box and Jim will interrupt us. That posture didn't go away. So now that doesn't go away. I had to set the teeth for that to function within this woman because that's how this works for her. This is her. So now I cleared all the teeth. So you can see like when she speaks, everything has that clearance out to her left. So this is VITA Excel anterior teeth and linguiform posterior teeth, all with freedom and centric, and the cusps are all free and clear to work within this system. Now, I'm going to play the video again, and I'm going to tell you something extremely profound about her. So not only did we correct some of the overclosure issues and the sagging muscles and stuff, but on that first denture, you could see how well worn down they were, and she had to really mill her food to chew. So during the consultation process, I was talking to her about her chewing, and one of the questions is, why are you here? Well, it's time to get a new denture. Okay, why? What's it like for you? What are you feeling? Oh, it's just harder for me to eat. Okay, explain that, please. Well, it's more labored. It takes me longer to chew. I'm just not chewing it as well. So she's able to figure that out without feeling her teeth. And then I start asking her questions. Okay, well, I need to ask you something personal. It's not gross, but I need to talk to you about it because our overriding statement in my office clinically is quality of chewing life. Under that statement is quality of life because you have to eat to live. So then under that falls everything else. So quality of chewing life. So you're telling me that there's an issue with the quality of your chewing life. And now I'm going to focus in on the quality of your life. So you're saying to me somewhere along the way here that your quality of life's being affected because of your eating. I want to talk to you now about your digestive system because you have to chew your food. It has to be minced into a ball for you to swallow it. It has to be minced enough for your stomach to break it apart and add the enzymes to dissolve it into a slurry for then your intestines to absorb the slurry mixture, which are the nutrients, and then your colon to pick up the rest and you poop it out. So when you go to the bathroom, your bathroom and your poop should be in the shape of a hot dog and soft. That tells me that the system is working right. And she's like, well, actually, Mark, I'm on a laxative. And so I said, really? Okay, because that's my next question is, are you on a laxative? Because if you can't eat right, everything else isn't going to work right. Now, sometimes there's medical conditions and there can be a lot at play here is if someone's on a laxative. But what I can try to rule out is it your teeth? So then I followed that. And so then we brought her back in a month after insert. She's had one adjustment on this. And I said, are you still on your laxative? She's like, no, I don't need it anymore. And my doctor's like, wow, I didn't even think about that. And she's like, I don't need the laxative anymore. So you want, again, when I mean profound, you are changing someone's life. And we don't slap teeth together. I am so fiercely adamant about that statement. What we do affects someone's health, whether you see the patient or not. I'm showing all of you this, even if you're a humble technician on the bench. Man, what you build fits inside the human body, and someone's trying to function with it, and it affects their quality of life. I admire all of us for what we do. I am so humbled that you're here with me and joining me to hear my story, and I hope I can inspire you to learn, because we were able to get this lady off of laxative. She's a patient for life. She's sending patients to us because the bigger totality of this is that she sees that you care about her health, not just the denture. I'm mentioning this to all of you so that you have the ability to influence, whether you're the technician, to influence your boss, and if you're the boss, to influence the doctor, and if you're the denturist, to influence yourself and the patient. Start asking these questions, because this is how you build your practice. But this is patient care, and this is about looking after someone and understanding it. So I set the teeth to operate in this system. So again, the chew cycle influences interaction. So we don't chew in centric. So I set the teeth to function. So that's the architecture of it, and that's the repercussions of it that I've learned, and how to manage the common stresses that you and I face every day to make my life less stressful here at the office. So what's our normal? Well, this is what we were taught. We were taught working and balancing. So these are old slides picked out of a book, because this is still what we do all these years later. And now you have to imagine that that has to function like that in the mouth for that to work. Well, I've shown you now some video, like it doesn't function like that. You can't perfectly touch and bilaterally land working and balancing occlusion with food in your mouth. Sorry, doesn't happen. So again, I mean that, most respectively, but still the reality of the situation is, for me, in my observation, it doesn't work like that. So what do I do? Well, you really, now it's about the architecture of the patient chewing and me setting teeth within that chew cycle, and ask myself, what's the patient's normal? So this is what we do. So now I'm bringing you into the next phase. So this is how we're taught. Okay, look, working and balancing occlusion, right? So we set the teeth up, and I move the articulator like that, because that's what we were taught. That's how the articulator is designed. And we set up the teeth like that, in that manner, and move the articulator in that manner. Well, now with the videos that you've seen of select patients and the understanding of a chew cycle, it doesn't work like that. This is what I want you to start doing. Move an articulator like this. Start to move it like a chew cycle. You want to see all of those cusps function within what you perceive to be the chew cycle of a patient. And if you don't know the chew cycle because you're a technician and you never see the patient and the doctor will never tell you this information, well, then you make an educated decision. And you make an educated guess as to the information you have available, if you have any information available of the patient. But you know that there's a chew cycle. So then work the articulator like there's a chew cycle. This is more like reality than the other way. So now I manipulate an articulator like this for everybody based on what I think. And then again, if you don't know, then you make an educated decision, but at least you know it exists. Start moving the articulator like a chew cycle. And once we get to the document camera, I'll show you a couple other things. So here's another patient with another video. Watch her. Okay. So that lady, you saw the jaw posture to the left as well. I don't know what it is about the left, but posture's out there, okay? And you saw it looked normal in her mouth, right? So I have to get out of my way and accept that there's different things out there and my belief system. So it's really hard to get out of your own way and understand, wait a minute, I got to look at this 360, because now I'm building teeth with the bite buried in. So that denture that you just saw, that's what it's like in Centric. There's what, 6-7 millimeters of overbite there, but it doesn't present like that in the mouth. So that's what you can do to challenge yourself and start building. I built this to function within her chew cycle, and now I'm able to affect her quality of life in a positive way because I let go and got out of my way. So this is about challenging yourself, pardon me, and challenging what you believe and understanding the architecture of what we do. So a lot of our education is focused on the technical aspects, and what you're seeing from me today is really the soft side of things, understanding the person, understanding the humanity and how it works, and the soft side of things. And I want to talk a little bit now, I've alluded to it at the beginning of the PowerPoint, but now I want to talk about how to read a denture patient. So for those that are listening that have direct contact with the patient, these are things I observe. And for the technicians that don't, I want you to put this in your back pocket, because these are the questions you're going to want to ask the doctor on all those cases you have where they're coming back and you're in the weeds and there's trouble, because there's something going on. An adjustment is a story. The dentures tell us a story of how it's functioning in the mouth. If the patient's never back, then that means it's functioning to that person and the story is positive. When they're back for an adjustment and making complaints, but those complaints are telling us a story of how it's not functioning within that architecture of that person's mouth. So number one is general disposition of the person. Are they happy or mad at the world? Because when they're mad at the world, they're probably not going to like your teeth too much either. General health, mobility, medications. Do they have tremors? Are they shaking? Because remember, how do you take a proper centric when the patient's head is jerking around everywhere? That's impairment of the nervous system. So then you can't build them teeth that are locked in centric, because the whole system needs to be fluid, or because they need that fluidity. And then I want you to look at their arm and their hand. What? Yeah, look, what do you see? Well, laser pointer, boop, bruising. So if she's bruising here, do you think she's going to be bruising in her mouth? Yep. Arthritis. If there's arthritis here, do you think there's arthritis in her temporomandibular joint? Yeah, probably. Look at her skin. If her skin is thinning here, do you think her mucosa is thinning? Yep. And so what do you think? If she's bruising, that means she can't handle hydraulics so well. So the dentures put hydraulics down on the ridge where the skin is probably thinning. So do you think she's going to be more susceptible to sores? Yep. And so now are you going to open up that vertical as much to where the textbook tells you to open that vertical now? Should you? These are questions now that you can ask and again, try to customize, especially if you're in the weeds on a case. The first question out of my mouth is, who are you building this for? Tell me about the person. I don't care about the technical. Tell me about the soft side. Tell me about the person. Because look at this. See the glitter nails? This lady still goes to the salon. She's still concerned about her appearance, so she can handle some things still, because she still cares. So look at this person. What do you see? Ooh. Does that look well to you? So now, do you think I'm going to open the vertical on this case? Should I? Look at her bruising. Look at her skin. Look at the arthritis. I mean, honestly. So do you think she can handle it? So I leave this with you because, again, the denture you craft goes into somebody. So when it comes back on adjustments, you have to ask yourself, what's the story it's telling me? And what did I miss? Get out of your way. And this is about patient care. Because when the patient's happy and we can make these changes in the office, clinically, and on the lab bench, then it's going to function better because the cases aren't going to come back to the lab on remakes and resets and on and on and on. And or the patient isn't coming back for a boatload of adjustments. Okay, what do you see? Normal. So, okay, dude's all right. So remember, you cannot separate the mouth from the person. What a beautiful quote. I love it. You cannot separate the mouth from the person. So let's apply some of the information. So freedom type denture teeth are designed like a mortar and pestle. So that's what you see on, whoops, that's what you see on the bottom end here. So this is what I use. I use lingual-formed teeth. It's a mortar and pestle. I set everything up now to function within a chew cycle, so the cusps are free and clear to function within that chew cycle. This crushes food. I would like to tell everyone, and I'm going to put it on record because this is being recorded, that I have eliminated the complaint of I cannot eat lettuce from my office ever since now I switched to lingual-formed denture teeth now for the last, what? They've been on the market for what, 15 years or longer. Jim would probably remember that better than me. Gone is that complaint because this is mortar and pestle. This stuff crushes food. I don't get that complaint anymore because it works. This is mortar and pestle. So look at the difference on our good old 20-degree teeth that I was also taught on. These are like milling, like a mill, like a flour mill. And the design is very similar. And a mill works by grinding, and it has to be horizontal, whereas a mortar and pestle is up and down. This has trouble crushing the lettuce. This has trouble, period, because again, the motion of this has to be horizontal, which rocks the denture base, which causes the ill fit. And you wonder why the denture adhesive market in the US is $150 million a year market. We all have a collective together. So my goal here is sharing with you my journey. And now I want to talk about the raw cost of our problems. So this is now an understanding for those clinically, for you to understand your business, and now understand as a technician what that doctor goes through. So the average adjustment rate for a denture, so this is what a patient will come back to your office for an upper and lower denture, is on average 2 to 5 times. So what does that mean? Well, most adjustments are about 20 to 30 minutes in length because you got to get the patient in, introduce them into the office, get them seated in the chair, come on in, figure out what the problem is. You have to talk to them a little bit and have manners. And then what's the problem? Go deal with the problem, disinfect everything, put it back in. Is it okay? Release the patient, clean the treatment room, chart what happened. There's your 20 to 30 minutes. Okay, so let's say, for example, you charge $2,600 for a denture. Say the lab bill on that is $700. So in Canada here, we have a differentiation between our professional fee, which is the professional cost of building the denture, the patient contact, and then the lab fee. So we break it up in Canada. So this is what a lab would charge. So this is an upper and lower. So again, these fees are going to be relative to where you are, and they're going to change across the country and such. So I appreciate that. This is more so of just an understanding of what it costs. One moment for me. Sorry, I needed a drink of water there. Thank you. So your subtotal left for the profit of the office after your lab bill is $1,900 left for the dental office. Now, if your overhead is running at about 75%, that left a raw profit of $475 on that denture patient. They come back at 2 adjustments, you're starting to lose money, and that's based on $100 an hour. So honestly, do you think like dentists are charging probably more than $100 an hour, especially prosthodontists? So when you look at this, your overhead is not even included on that. That's just the straight fee of the doctor. So that patient's back in that office for 20 to 30 minutes. What was your overhead on that 20 to 30 minutes? My dear colleagues, those numbers are at zero basically right away, because when the patient's back for an adjustments, you hemorrhage money. Okay, so when the lab can do things on the lab end to make the teeth fit better, the doctor's going to see that the denture fits better. patient's not back for adjustments, so the doctor's happy with the lab, i.e. your business increases and is comfortable. As for a denture clinic, you cut down on the adjustment rate, you are not hemorrhaging money like you would. Let's look at the time. One adjustment a day at 30 minutes is 2.5 hours a week, is 10 hours a month. Now, I've been around enough now and have traveled and appreciate the honesty of our colleagues that a lot of denturists are doing anywhere from 5 to 15 adjustments a day. I know in large dental offices in the US, they're doing upwards of 20 adjustments a day spread between practitioners. You guys, that's a phenomenal amount of stress, time, and you're not generating income. And that chair isn't generating you income. You make money when the chair's full and you're doing productive work. This is a huge draw on your office. And this is where the stress comes from. Because let's face it, when do you fit in these adjustments? So now I'm not eating my lunch today and I'm eating on the fly. Well, you do that over 5 years, you wonder why you're burned out. You wonder why the doctor's burned out, why the denturist is burned out when you have to deal with these things. This is a drain on your time and your resource and your office staff. And then even from a lab perspective, when these cases are coming back and the courier costs and the resets and all of this, you guys, it drains on us. So what did I show you? Well, we've got a chew cycle, we have freedom and Centric, move your articulator differently, start trying to set teeth with and function within a chew cycle, and start using freedom and Centric denture teeth. And I named the brands that have it. And now you start using that and you watch the acceptance level go up because the thing fits better in the architecture of the person's mouth. And you're happier because you're less stressed because you're not dealing with the big deal of the adjustments. This is the bottom line. All of us are here to prevent this. Because when this works, the patient is happy and it's working within that architecture of that person. That's why we do this, for them. And if we can get them off a laxative, even better. Quality of chewing life, quality of life. So understanding the cost of an adjustment, when it was brought to my attention, was 20 whatever years ago, when I was, maybe year 10 or so of my practice. That was my aha moment, man, when I realized, wow, look what this is costing me, from time, from stress, and from the money end of it. It was huge. And again, we all laugh and joke, and I've been in a room full of denturists and go, oh yeah, I eat lunch and it's real crass, and secretary comes and it's like, you stick them in my lunch hour, and yeah, but you do that over years and you wonder why we're burned out. Life is stressful enough. And now if we can control the stress here clinically, then that helps, because then that helps us with the other stresses that we have in our life. So that's why that began my journey to try and get better control of this here in the office and have my staff happier and me happier. So that's why I wanted to share this with you, and understanding these slices was a really big deal. And that was the point of the PowerPoint, was so that when I show you a couple things here next on the document camera, you have a base understanding behind it and why I do it this way now, and the benefit that it's been for me personally and for my patients. So what are our takeaways? Well, number one, recognize burnout for you and your staff and the problems and the repetitive problems. What was causing those repetitive problems was that we were using denture teeth that were locked together and we weren't setting it within the architecture of the mouth. The central nervous system and its belief and built on patterns, and then how that influences the denture. So when you change the vertical, you change the bite cycle slightly, you're changing the pattern that someone's been used to. So where I'm getting on this, and again, is I'll just going to pick on the technicians. You have that case come back, it's come back again, the doctor's on the phone going, we're all frustrated. And that's when I need you to stop and go, tell me about the person. Tell me about them. What was it like when they first came into your office? What was the denture like? What have we changed from that? So did you open the vertical? What did we do since then? Because it's telling us a story. And that story is it's not working. So now what are we going to change? So now do we need to back off the vertical? Do we need to, have the teeth function so that they're functioning out to the left because that's where the patient functions? That's what I want you to stop and do is the soft side of this. How a denture patient feels in the hydraulics, the tissue-based, and then again, we stick that on an implant or a bar. Now you've taken that compression away. So they don't even feel their teeth touch together. Now they don't even feel the denture squish on the gum because it's on a bar. So you telling me how accurate now is the bite? Because now we're solely relying on muscle memory for Centric. Well, boy, that's, how accurate are muscles? So, touch your nose in the same place every time and tell me how accurate you are. So how to read a patient and look at their arm and their hand. And if you repetitively touch your nose, you're going to accurately, but it has to be repetitive. Okay. Then you close your eyes and do it and see how accurate you are. That's my point with the central nervous system. It uses sensories to understand things. And then when we come in there as practitioners and change it, we're changing the central nervous system's understanding and its perceptions of the denture. Look at a denture patient, how to read them and gain information from them, because that's going to tell you how to do it and how much more freedom they need. Identify a chew cycle, set teeth within it, move the articulator like the chew cycle. Remember, it's more than slapping teeth together. Think beyond. You cannot separate the mouth from the person. So my sincere wish is to support you regardless of your position and the ergo the patient that places their trust in you in that line, in that pie, whether you're the technician, the denturist, or the doctor. So my goal is to do that. So this is me. So at this point in the video, you'll be able to pause it once it's on the YouTube there under VITA North America. So you can email me or text me. Just please be patient with me. Sometimes I get a lot of emails and I'm here to help people, but it can take me a little bit to respond. So thank you for your understanding on that. Jim will also give you the information for how to get a hold of the VITA reps and the call center. So he'll do that at the end as well. I'm going to switch over, okay, and get to the document camera here. So bear with me while I get that set up. I'm going to show you a couple things via the document camera. So just allow me a minute. Get everything functional here for us. 1 minute for me. Thank you. I had to get the remote for the document camera. It was a little bit out of my reach. Okay. All right, I want to do this with the light on low. So this is okay, let me get the arrow out of there. This is dense supply. So this is what we are typically taught, okay? All right, so this is more of a mill. The teeth have to mill to work, okay? When we set them up, we're typically, geez, Mark, you're upside down. We have to, it looks like this, so it's quite a tight bite. We're looking for that tight groove. And now these teeth have no freedom in Centric, but they work in balance. So when I do this, and I go through this motion, the teeth are working and balancing. They're milling the food, but in Centric, I cannot wiggle the denture. So when you do this, it'll go immediately up and go into the working and balancing. There's no freedom in that Centric there. So one of the questions that's often asked to me is, but Mark, if I use less of a degree, so I use a functional or 10 degree, is that going to help? And my answer is totality, no, because it's still locked in Centric. So even though the cusps, pardon me, are flatter, that's going to certainly help within the chew cycle to reduce the risk of the hit and slide, but you're still asking them to pinpoint land Centric because there's still no freedom in Centric. So the thing is still going to rock and roll even with less cusp teeth. The freedom in centric is what really is important here. So that's what we're taught. This is our standard, okay? And again, I'm just going to switch to this really quickly. So if you are in an office that uses this type of an articulator, again, we're used to doing this. So we are checking working and balancing contacts by doing this. So in all those videos I showed you, does this represent anything of like what you just saw? No, I want you to take this now and you got to hold it in your hand, but you do this to it. It's going to take you a little bit to figure it out, but even this articulator, you can do a chew cycle. I can mimic a chew cycle on this thing. I just have to hold it differently, but I want you to please start to move a articulator in the architecture of what it's like for that person, okay? So that's this, all right? So you can go and you can now move an articulator, and I want you to start doing that, regardless of the articulator that you have, okay? So this is lingo form. So this is VITA. So this is the mortar and pestle. This is what's, again, eliminated the lettuce issue. You can see now it's not locked in. It's a little bit of difference, a little bit more open. But when we look at it from this, again, doesn't look open. It hides itself. Okay, so you don't see lingualized occlusion per se. Okay, so it hides itself. And now this teeth, and I'll try to do it with my fingers without wiggling. Let's try that. Hang on a minute. I got to hold it for the camera. There it is. Let's try that. I was doing it before. There we go. There's that little bit of wiggle. Okay. In centric. There it is. It's hard to do in your hand. Okay. And it's very minute. It's about a millimeter in centric, so that you can hold the teeth together and you gently can, there we go, gently wiggle these things in centric, okay? So this is the mortar and pestle approach to things. And these teeth then are set within the chew cycle, so that then when they're coming in, I'm more, again, worried that the cusps aren't binding when they come through the chew cycle. So this is just the straight. There's that little bit of freedom in centric. This thing can wiggle because now I'm going to bring these teeth into play. So the freedom in centric, and what you saw is that little bit of wiggle here. So that means that they can land in centric because there's a little helicopter pad here to land in. And then it's not going to land and slide into position because the whole thing is locked in, meaning that this fossa is locked against this cusp. There's that little bit of freedom. And that's what's been the real aha moment, and the kicker here is that they can chew and land in there because remember, they cannot feel their teeth. Okay, that's been huge. So Jim, if you're listening, are there any questions so far as we move forward?
We do, but go ahead and finish up, and then we'll conclude it and get into all the questions.
Okay, cool. Questions are good. You know why questions are good? Because it means that you're thinking. So this is a model, and I want to show you, and I'm going to highlight you the rugae. So there's the rugae. It starts here, and it points to the cuspid. And then the other rugae, it's hiding a little bit. Okay. And it's there, and it points to the cuspid. That's the long branch rugae. So on the study model here, it's right here. So what the long branch rugae does is it points to the cuspids. So we're getting into a little bit of model analysis. So what model analysis does is the rugae of a person actually points to where the cuspid should go for that person based on the, what's the key word of the day? Architecture of their mouth. So now it's given me a guideline of where to put things. So when I do the setup now, even on this type of an articulator and I'm in a lab and I got to turn and burn, when I start setting the teeth, I still want to make sure that those cuspids are at the end of this long branch rugae, because that tells me that then they're in position. Because what's here? The cuspid eminence, which is the bony part. What's here? The corner of their face, okay, right under their nose, so that everything lines up for this person. Because this now gets into what's called golden proportion, which means the height, width, everything that's here is mathematically equated to what you see on their face. Yeah, everything is math. So what's important about this is when I line up the cuspids here, it lines up in their face properly. So this is a small little check that I can do in the lab, even as a technician, to make sure that I'm customizing this denture for this person, so that I'm making sure that the cuspids go here because that's going to line up properly in their face. That's the beauty of model analysis. So it shows us, again, to identify the papilla, where the papilla is. You cut the papilla in half. This tells us the true midline of that person. This horizontal line, we want to set the incisal edge about 6 to 7 millimeters ahead. That's why all of our fancy rulers have that marking on them of 6 to 7 millimeters. And that's where that came from, because on average, that's where we found through study where the central incisal edge is in relation to the papilla, because the papilla is an anatomical landmark, it doesn't move. And the rugae are anatomical landmarks, they don't move unless they're surgically moved or altered. So they're there. If you leave the denture out, then it allows this to hydrate before you take the impression, because then you're not taking the impression on squished gum. So it allows it to rehydrate, and then they show up better. So you're actually setting the teeth in the lab and they're coming across, and you're setting the cuspid in reference to this. This is really important because then the other teeth will fall into place through here. What we're looking for is that the molar of the lower ends up in and around the deepest, in and around the deepest part of the ridge. I have to look at the screen at the same time as doing this. Okay, so the lower first molar should be in and around this area because this is where it used to be. This is where the whole system and architecture was set up for this person. And even though the ridge changes and resorbs over time, what we're trying to do is still put these teeth in relation to the masseter muscle and all of the other anatomy of where they used to be. Okay, so to do that, let me just reach over here. So I have a protractor, okay, gift that I can use, and what I do is I track over and I do this, and it draws the shape of the ridge. Let me just shut the light off, you can see it a little better. And then what I'm looking for is to find in and around where the deepest part of the ridge is, and that's right here where I was pointing before, and that's where I'm looking to set this molar. So when I do this, and I have the cuspid, and then I start setting my other teeth, regardless of its upper or lowers, so I set first, whatever. Once I nail this position and the other teeth come into play, that upper molar will be here, and that then is a reference to check that it's here on the lower. And then that's going to all line up for the architecture of that person in terms of where the masseter muscle is, where the bulge of the muscle is on the face for that person. All of the teeth are functioning within that similar corridor of where they used to be. So again, that's why I really like the name of the course and the architecture of it, because this is little things that we can do to help us understand the architecture of the person and get it closer with them, even if we don't see them. This is a quick little thing you can do in the lab to just make sure that you're getting it close to where it is for that person. And then again, making sure that you're going through a chew cycle to make sure that the teeth are functioning within that chew cycle of the person. Okay. So again, I spend less concern about true working and balancing than I am about how this thing is going to function like this in the mouth. And that's how I've crafted and tailored this. So what has that done? Well, that's reduced my adjustment rate and consistently reduced my adjustment rate. And again, through that video of that person, it's helping me get people off of laxatives. And it's been profound. So I'm very blessed for my journey and what's been afforded to me to help me learn and grow. And I'm very, very grateful for all of the little nuances that have happened in my life to help me understand this. Excuse me as I need a drink again. Sorry, since it's so cold out, it's so dry. So nonetheless, I am very blessed, and that's why I wanted to share this with you. And this journey of mine as a practitioner to gain better control of adjustments, and ergo then gain better control of my stress dealing with patients, and ergo be a happier practitioner, but then give back to a profession that I care about deeply regarding the denture profession. And so thank you to everybody for the time that you spent with me. We can open it up to Jim now for some questions. The idea behind this was again, the understanding of the architecture of the mouth and freedom and setting cusps within that freedom and what that looks like. So now there's the technical aspects that we do in other courses where I can, show you the physical setting of the teeth and etc. Today was more so again, as my last webinar of the year, to understand, how this works, and my goal to support you, supporting the patient. So thank you. I'm available for questions and emails. I'm here to support you. The other thing again is I just want to take a moment to thank VITA North America for their support of the denture profession and us. So thank them for all of their hard work, and Jim and his team's hard work for putting this on. It's quite intense to do. And then please let VITA North America know what you'd like, what's pertinent for you in your area, because that helps us with course development. But if you want to see or do a hands-on course, if you let VITA know, then that gives them reason to do it. And it's like feedback. If nobody says anything, then they're like, well, how effective is it? So they need the feedback from you. So you will receive a notice or an email about thank you for participating in this webinar. Please share your thoughts. Please, again, I ask humbly to take a moment out of your time to respond back to that so that VITA knows what to do. You want more of me, then let them know. You want me in a hands-on course somewhere, then let them know so that they know that there's the need to do it. I'm here and available to support you and do it, and VITA will too. They just need that feedback to do it, so thank you. Okay, Jim, when you're ready, we can fire off some questions.
All right, so just a reminder, those of you who ask about CE, you'll receive an email from our education department that will direct you towards the CE. The workshop was recorded, so give us a day or two to post it, and it'll be on the VITA Learning web YouTube channel and also the VITA North America website as well. So please visit us. There's a lot of stuff there, probably close to 30 in the last 2 years that we've done with Mark, all different topics. So please visit us. If you need to get a hold of someone here at the help desk, here's our information there. If you need to get a hold of a rep during the video, when you look at the recording, you can stop here and find your rep in the area and contact them. We have another webinar later this month. That'll be the last one of the year. As Mark mentioned, this is the last one that Mark has. We've got some others that we'll be scheduling for 2023 with Mark. as well as some what we call remote workshops, where we actually send you some models and have you do a course wherever you may be. And then, of course, we're going to look forward to doing some in-person across the country, a few workshops as well, denture workshops. And then, of course, we will be at the CDS/LMT Chicago next year in February. That is held in Chicago every year. Those of you who go, we'll see you there. Mark will be there as well with
Come
several
find
other,
me. We'll talk.
Yeah, with several other trainers. So come visit us. If you haven't been to Chicago, it is pretty much the largest trade dental market for the laboratories across the U.S. And then FDLA is probably second, which we attend, and then LMT West, which we also attend as well. But first part of next year, February, come visit us in Chicago. This is the information for Mark. Mark's been gracious enough to let us provide you his contact information. If you need to have a follow-up with him, give him a call or an email. If he can't get back to you, he does run his own clinic. So he's a very busy person, but he will reach back out to you one way or another as soon as he can. All right. And then as far as questions for today, we've got several. One of the questions, Mark, is when you do a try-in, wax try-in, do you present it with the patient with different color waxes, or do you just stick with the basic pink wax for a try-in? You show them that it's a possibility of characterizing your dentures, or no?
Okay. That's a yes and no answer. Depends on the patient and the type of denture that we're building. So how fancy are you going to go for that patient is dependent on what their expectations are. So I've done both. So it's not an always answer. It's depends on the case answer. So it's yes, I've done it. Yes, I've done sculpting and shown them and presented this beautifully sculpted wax denture. And other times, no, because it's just not necessary because the patient has no interest in that. So the answer to that question is I've done both. It's yes and no. Most patients aren't so interested in how the wax denture looks. Based on my experience and what I draw here in my office, I typically draw really difficult work. So I have a referral system from doctors, medical doctors, surgeons, and dentists that are sending me stuff that just has failed from a standard clinical perspective. So my skill set now has been dealing with people that have tried many dentures and it's not working. So those cases, I'm not really interested in wooing them, so to speak, with a wax, really sculpted denture, as I am about the fit and function of it, because that's why they're here. They're here because the fit and function has failed prior. So I've done both. Yeah, it's fine. I used to actually also coat them in a nice little almost like a minty oil after to make them taste good. And oh yes, I've played around with it. But then I always cycle back to where I am now is again the central nervous system and how it's interpreting it. And again, if I think that they need that sculpted, I'll sculpt it. But I am not going to say maybe do all the wax in different color waxes, but I'm going to sculpt it to the needs of that architecture of that mouth.
All right. Got a question from Shannon. In order to properly achieve function in the unique chewing cycle, the equilibration and milling in excursive movements after processing must be done intraorally, correct? Question mark.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
That's a one-word answer to that long question. I love it.
Well, here's the second part.
In all reality, you can stick it back on the articulator to do any processing defects or changes. But at the end of the day, the main articulator is this one here in the patient. Honestly,
so
that's where it matters.
That's her second part is
yes.
There would be no way to transfer this to the articulator in the lab? Question mark.
Okay, so if I remember that implant case that I showed you that she had buzzed the occlusion flat, and then so I knew all of those things. I knew that she postured to her left and stuff. I didn't remount that case after it was processed because I processed it in IvoCap. So I didn't remount it. It went in. I hand looked at it once the dentures were done. That's another course for another day. And then I inserted it in the mouth and checked it. So I'm more concerned that the articulator I can influence again and move and try to mimic the movements that I saw in the patient's mouth. So that's what I do. But really, again, you're right. This is the final. This is where, again, it has to work.
All right. Question, how do you address the phonetics of patients speaking to correct the position of anterior and premolars?
How do I address? Can you say that question again, Jim?
So
it went in, but it rattled around.
How do you address the phonetics or understand through the phonetics to make sure that you have the correct position of the anteriors and premolars?
Right. So a long-winded response. One, cuspids at the end of the long branch rugae. Anterior teeth 6 to 7 millimeters ahead of the center of the incisive papilla, looking to see if they fall and the teeth fall on the wet dry line of the lip. But the wet dry line of the lip is just a ballpark. It is just it's not a must, but it's where we're targeting. And then I get them to speak days of the week, months of the year to trigger the building block phonetics of English and or their mother language. And then I'm watching the phonetics of the mouth move and the posture and the architecture of the mouth move to ascertain whether the teeth are in the right position or whether I need to drift them out a little bit or in a little bit. That's also based on why are you in my office to begin with? What was the problems prior of what brought you into the office? So on a new denture, like why are we replacing the old one? So to answer further to that question, like if they say that they can't speak or enunciate, then what was the condition of the denture when they came in? How worn down was it, and how was that affecting their speech? I hope that offers a little bit of insight. I'm trying to use model analysis to set the teeth in that architecture of their body better, and then using the key phonetics to try and ascertain if that's right for them, following the golden proportion rule.
And Mark, reminder to the audience that you've got several of your webinars online that have been recorded, and they can go visit that VITA North America YouTube channel. And I think there's several that go over specifically phonetics and how to do that as well.
Yes, and it was about, I think the titles were more about building teeth to the patient and the architecture of the person. Again, similar types of titles. Thanks, Jim, for that reminder. Yes.
And then Maria wanted to just say that she's taken several of your courses, and when she applies it to her real life technical skills, it's actually worked for her and has made her a better technician. So she wants to thank you.
Thank you for that.
And then I'm going to combine a couple of questions together here.
I'm going to interrupt Jim. Sorry, I just thank you, Maria, for that. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry for interrupting you, Jim. That means a lot because that puts tank fuel back into my tank. So thanks for being my superhero. But thank you. It's been my journey, and thank you for that feedback. My goal is to support you supporting that patient, and that's just awesome. Thank you so much. I'm happy it's working. Woohoo!
No, it's good. It's what it's all about, right? Is to get people trained and do better work or think about what they're doing, so it just doesn't, oh, I read it in the book, so therefore that's the only way you can do it. So this is all good. So I'm going to combine a couple questions together, as I said. One is like, do you put second molars on your cases, which combined with another question, do you drop what teeth do you drop if you need to, whether it's a first buy or a molar?
Right.
And
Okay, so number one is the sizing. So I use lingo form on everything. So it's the size. They come in different posterior sizes. So you try to match, number one, the size to what you think is necessary for the arch size. And then if I'm ever going to drop a case or drop a tooth, I will drop a second premolar versus a first or second molar. I always want a first molar and a second molar, if at all possible, because they're wider and there's more surface to bring the food up to get crushed than what's on a second premolar. So if you're going to drop a tooth, I always drop the second premolar in favor of a molar first and second. If size permits and size is restricted, I use then 2 second molars. I still want more tooth to bring the food up to get crushed in that mortal pestle idea. So that's why I'll use then 2 second molars if that is a space issue. But molars always, because it's a bigger surface to bring the food up to get crushed.
Earlier you talked about attachments. The question was, do you normally insert your processing caps chair side and do it into orally, or you do it in your lab to process your attachment?
Great question. What's worked for me in Mark's world is I do it lab. So everything gets done in the lab, and then I insert it without the nylon O-rings in, and I just make sure that fits passive. And I check everything, and then I put the O-rings in chair side, and then snap it in. That's been effective for me, and that's how I like to do it. I've done both ways, and I find that I'm just more successful and less finicky by doing it in the lab through a lab process. That's been my experience.
Well, that's good to know. Before assuming that the dentist is scanning, intraoral scanning edentulous, is there a time period that they have to allow the ridge to relax before they scan it?
Okay, so my experience on that is I would really like the denture out. 15 minutes is ideal. There's no studies on this per se. This is more of just, I need to release the pressure on the hydraulics on the ridge. So I'll take whatever I can get. I'll take 5 minutes because you don't know how fast it's rebounding, because how it rebounds today and how it rebounds tomorrow could be 2 different time frames depending on the patient, their fluidity level, and how the blood is pumping, etc. So rule of thumb for me is I like it if it could be 15 minutes. That would be ideal.
All right. When using a freedom of movement concept, do you find less relines or less often, or the time period is longer?
Yes, less relines. And again, I'm going to say this for the record, I've eliminated, okay, I better be careful. I've virtually eliminated the need for soft liners. I don't carry soft lining material in my office. If I need it, I got to outsource it to a dental lab. I just don't use it anymore. Rarely. That's because the freedom of movement architecture. So yes, we've been misdiagnosing this. And that's why we run to a reline too quickly. And because if you reline it when it doesn't need it, you're gonna bugger it up even more. That's, again, my gray hair teaching me that lesson, where I've done more damage by relining it than going after the root cause, which was the occlusion.
All right, I think we're coming up with the last question. Do you set up usually a 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 or question mark? So again, it's indication specific question, but
1-to-1. I'm a 1-to-1 dude. 1-to-1. Yeah, because that's how the teeth are designed. It's more European, but yeah, you want the cusps over the fossa, so it's essentially 1-to-1. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, it's been very effective for me.
Excellent. So, Mark, I want to thank you for your time again. The audience, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks,
Please
everybody.
visit us on the website. Any last parting words for everyone, Mark?
Again, Thanks, Jim. Thanks, VITA North America. Yay. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Mike, thanks for hearing me out. I hope to inspire, and thank you for the feedback. If you need me, I'm here to support you. So something to think about. And then again, please respond to the questionnaire that you're going to get in a day or two, and write a couple thoughts down for VITA so that they know what to do next year and help us plan for next year. And again, as Jim eloquently said, come to LMT then, and find me, and bring all of your denture baggage and questions, and let's talk. Then I'll have samples in front of me to show you. This is about supporting a patient. I'm a patient for people. I want the best for me and my family. I see that again, just we're here to help. We were drawn to this profession for a reason. And so thank you. Thanks for your time. I wish everyone well and best wishes, and thank you. And thanks to Jim.
Well, thanks again, Mark, and appreciate everybody that was on today's webinar. Please visit our VITA North America YouTube channel. You'll see also dozens and dozens of different concepts that Mark discusses on removables. And I wish to see you again in the future next year for 2023. And this will conclude today's webinar. Thank you for joining us.
Bye, everybody.